This is Lesson 1. Welcome to Flash CS5. Throughout the lessons in this book, you'll learn a lot of exciting things from drawing and animation to working with video and audio, and of course, publishing your final movie. But of course, before you can run, you first have to walk. And our first steps are going to be to become familiar with the workspace where you're going to be spending most of your time. To get started, you should have all documents closed and you should be staring at the start page like we are here. The start page allows us to carry out a number of different tasks. The first one we're going to do is create a brand new blank document so we can explore the workspace further. To get started, go under the Create New column of the Welcome screen and click the first option, which is ActionScript 3.0. This creates a brand new Flash work file or FLA file for us to play in. Go ahead and click, and you'll see a brand new Flash document is opened within our workspace. Now, first things first, let's become familiar with the workspace and figure out what all of these different panels and toolbars do. First, we should be looking at a white rectangle in the middle of our workspace. This is what we refer to as the stage, and this is where all of the action and magic happens. The stage is where we draw, create symbols, create animation, and place video for our users to see. In addition, the stage represents the viewable area of our movie, so the actual dimensions of our movie are represented by this white rectangle here. The gray area on the outside is basically our work area. You can think of this as backstage. We can draw here and we can place elements here too, and we can even animate elements on and off the stage using this gray area. But remember, only the white area of our workspace represents the viewable area of our Flash movie and what our final users will see. In the upper left-hand corner, you're going to see our Document tab, right now which reads Untitled 1 because we haven't saved or given our document a name yet. As you work with multiple documents in Flash, you'll see multiple tabs appear along the top, and these will allow us to easily see what documents we have open and navigate between them as we need to. Now, before we go further, we want to make sure that we're all looking at the exact same workspace. When you first open Flash, you should have a default workspace, but as you change things around, Flash tries to remember exactly what it is that you did. So just in case your panels have been closed, toolbars collapsed, or otherwise, we want to make sure we're all seeing the exact same view. So what we're going to do is reset our workspace by going up to the Window menu, going down to Workspace, and we should have the Essentials workspace selected. So we want to make sure at first we select that. And if that's already selected, right underneath we want to make sure we select Reset Essentials. You'll see what that does is it resizes and reorganizes all of our panels to their factory fresh settings, and that's exactly what we want to do here. Now let's take a quick look over to the right side of our workspace. One of the most important panels that we're going to be working with is the Property Inspector, labeled here as Properties, and you'll see it's docked along with our Library panel, which we'll take a look at in a moment. The Property Inspector is a contextual panel. In other words, depending on what we have selected, it shows us exactly what it is that we're looking at, lets us set things such as dimensions, color, options for tools that we select, and in this particular case, it just shows us the overall settings for our movie, things such as dimensions, frame rate, and the background color of our stage. There's actually a number of different things you can do from the Property Inspector before you even have to look at another menu or panel, so it can be very handy during the course of any project. As a matter of fact, the first thing we're going to do with our Property Inspector is we're going to change the background color of our stage. So you shouldn't have anything selected. We can go ahead here and at least leave our selection tool selected at the top. And we can go down here, and where it says stage, you'll see we have a color chip that allows us to set the background color. Let's go ahead and click on that, and that produces a color palette for us. And let's go ahead and choose just a blue color here with the eyedropper. And once we select that, you'll see it changes the color of our stage. The next thing we may want to do is change the overall size of our stage, or dimensions, in pixels. And you'll see the size is shown here, width by height, and we can click the Edit button. And from here, this opens the Document Settings dialog box. Let's go ahead and change the overall width to 640 and the height to 480. Now keep in mind that by default, this is in pixels. So pixels may be somewhat new for you, but keep in mind that pixels are what the web uses, and this is how we actually measure objects on the screen. So we're going to set this to 640 pixels by 480 pixels and click OK to change our stage size. Now when viewing our document, we may want to zoom in or out, and in the upper right hand corner we have exactly that. We have the ability to zoom using this drop down menu. So you'll see we can do a number of things. We can use presets such as Fit in Window, and we can do that by selecting that, and it increases or decreases the size of our movie so it fits all within the viewable area here of our workspace. If you click on this again, you can choose Show Frame, and that reveals a little bit more of the outside gray work area. Click on this once more, and let's simply return to 100%. And that zooms our movie to its exact original size. And that may mean that we actually have to scroll a little bit to see the outer edges or sides. Now, if you've worked with other Adobe applications, you may see some similarities here in terms of how the toolbars and the panels work. And as you can see here, many of the panels in your default workspace appear in icon mode. So for instance, here we have our color panel, and if we click on this, it expands it directly off of the icon toolbar. Directly below it, we have swatches, and so on. Every workspace has different default panels, and the Essentials workspace has pretty much everything you need to get started. To collapse a panel, just click its icon once more. Directly behind our Property Inspector, if we click the Library tab, tucked away here, this reveals our Library panel. We learn more about the Library panel in Lesson 3 of this book, but the general gist is that the Library panel is a storage container for things that we may import into our movie, as well as things that we save and decide to reuse later on. The Library panel will become very valuable later on in this book, but for now, just make sure you know where the Library panel is in case you need it. We can go ahead and click the Properties tab here to bring the Property Inspector forward once more. Now, if at any point you need to open up a little bit more screen real estate, for instance, you want more room for your stage or your workspace, what you can do is bring down expanded panels to icon view. For instance, if you look in the upper right-hand corner of the group that contains the Property Inspector and the Library panel, you'll see a small set of double arrows. This is the Collapse to Icons icon, and if we click on that, you'll see that it collapses those panels down to a handy icon view and opens up more room on our screen. If at any point you need to re-expand this, simply click those double arrows again. But if you want to keep that screen real estate as much as possible, collapse those panels down to icon view, and whenever you need them, just simply click on them in their collapsed view, and they'll expand off to the left like we see here. On the far right, we have our Tools panel. If you've worked with any other Adobe applications before, you're probably familiar with the Tools panel, and this contains everything we need, such as tools to draw, transform, set colors, and in the case of Flash, a number of other things that we can't do in standard Adobe drawing programs. Now, interestingly enough, the Tools panel is pretty much in icon view all the time, so why do we have these double arrows up here? Well, if we click on those, what it actually does is it collapses them even further. So if you need to open up more room for more panels or panel groups down here, you can do that. And sometimes it's just tidier to look at things this way. You can go ahead and re-expand those at any point. Now let's take a look at the very bottom of our workspace, and you're going to see two unfamiliar panels here, at least if you haven't worked with Flash before. These are the Timeline and the Motion Editor panels. Now the Timeline is the heart of Flash. It's what makes things move, it's what allows us to make things appear and disappear off the stage, and create multi-layered animations that we can eventually publish into really stunning web movies. You can think of the Timeline as basically a film strip turned over on its side. Each one of these frames, shown as a box along the timeline from left to right, represents a point in time. As we explore animation further on in the book, the timeline is going to become essential to placing and layering elements throughout the movie. The orange beam that runs vertically across the timeline panel is the playhead, and this determines at what point in the movie that we actually are. As the playhead moves, the movie advances forward and our animation plays. Right now we don't have any animation, so it's not really clear. But again, as you move forward in the book and you start creating your very first animations, you'll realize how significant the timeline panel is. On that same topic, the Motion Editor panel, which we can bring forward here, is what's going to allow us to fine-tune our animations later in the game. We're not going to talk too much about the Motion Editor panel because it doesn't really show a lot until we have something to work with. But it's important to know that the timeline and the Motion Editor work hand in hand to create really cool animations. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that timeline panel forward again. Now, one thing that's important to know about Flash, and this is true of many Adobe applications, is there's more than one way to get around to a specific feature. For instance, let's take colors, for example. Colors can be accessed in a number of places in the workspace. If I go over here to this collapsed panel group, you'll see that we actually have a color panel or a dedicated color panel where we can work with sliders, we can choose fill and stroke colors, or sometimes referred to as outline and fill colors. You'll see we also have stroke and fill color chips at the bottom of the Tools panel. And again, this is something pretty common to many Adobe applications where you can set color in more than one place. Interestingly enough, you can also set color from the Property Inspector. If I simply click and drag a new rectangle on the stage like so, and I select that rectangle, and re-expand the property inspector here. Actually, let's open that up entirely. You'll see I can set the fill and stroke from the property inspector as well. So if I want to change the outline or stroke color here, I can simply do that directly from here, or from the color panel over here. So the point of this is knowing that with many, many different basic and complex features in Flash, you can handle those from a number of different places in the workspace. So don't fret too much if you don't remember exactly where everything is. Chances are you'll find it in more than one place.